Remember when the cameras started showing agents for Trump?
China.
The business owners, the groups, the engineers and doctors waving flags, Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Indians, all pitching this idea that they were the good minority, the model minority, that if they worked hard enough, voted conservative enough, and distanced themselves from Black struggle enough, America would treat them like honorary white people. America would treat them like, yeah. So I wonder what actually happened, because during the Trump administration, Asian Americans favor Harris but shifted right by 5 points. So meaning they voted more conservative than they ever have before in American history. I wondered why.
But why?
When we look at the tall tale of the tape, when it comes to Asian Americans, and I'm not pointing out any particular ethnic group within Asian America, because we're going to group them all in together, because specific certain ethnic groups within Asian America, a large or considerable amount of them voted for conservative or voted for the Trump administration. So when I look at stories like this, Pauline Lee is a daughter of immigrants who came to the United States as teenagers with nothing. When they came here, they were dirt poor, she recalled. How do you come to a country with no money? How do you come to a country with absolutely nothing? How did you get here? You see how the tale of the tape, how the lies already spewed out of this already? They worked entry-level jobs at first before they both went on to study and build successful careers in California, no less. Now, we all know, how do you go to California with no money? It's already super expensive. And don't get me wrong, I know when other demographics of people reside in different cities and states, that they bring them in and they help them along the way. I got it. Illegal immigration is, for me, one of the biggest problems, they stated, because you're also giving these illegal immigrants a lot of our resources that should be retained for our own Americans, she said. That's a real problem. Look at the irony in that. Lee, a retired attorney, is active in Republican politics in Nevada. About 6 in 10 Asian Americans in the state voted for President Trump over Democratic nominee Kamala Harris in November. And in some regards, it's almost if they're voting against their best interests, because, again, you came over here as immigrants, but thus you are voting for someone who's anti-immigrant to a particular point. Now, that's a huge swing from 4 years earlier, when a little more than 6 in 10 Asians voted for President Joe Biden. So you see the flip-flop there. When they voted for President Trump, it was 6 in 10 Asians, but when they voted for Joe Biden, it was 6 in 10 Asians. So it literally, the vote switched. As we dive just a little bit deeper here, we can also have, again, other demographics of people who will come along the way. Chinese Americans for Trump. The irony in that as well, he's always been a starch resistant against China, except for business. And maybe you guys don't take it from me. And before we get into the powerful, comprehensive breakdown, I want you to hear some Asian Americans give their account of why they voted for Trump and why some of them are now changing. Very interesting.
Trump gonna be new president, number 47 for 2024. You know, I feel like so amazing and so happy, you know. And what about you guys? How do you feel? You feel like me or no?
I feel good.
So good, because, you know, I want to change.
Our parents raised us right here in America. If you love Trump and this country, give us a follow and we'll follow you back.
I'm totally flabbergasted that they said our parents raised us right and actually used that. But as we kind of go through this, ladies and gentlemen, we want to see how some of the recourse or the rebuttals from the Asian community. And again, this is not speaking to all Asians, but it is speaking to every Asian ethnic group that resides in America. So what happened? Because the same America some of y'all cape for is built on laws that once said no Chinese allowed, Japanese into internment camps, Asians are a threat. You didn't walk into a new deal, you walked back into an old pattern. That's the issue. Because the same country that banned your grandparents from even stepping onto its soil and blamed your communities for a whole pandemic was never going to save you. It was always going to use you.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So this evening, we're talking about all Asians. We're talking about that Asians for Trump choir, the cheer squad for the empire that sees your face as a threat, that sees your degree as a resource and your community as a convenient villain. We're going to talk about whiteness and war, the model minority trap, and why some of y'all thought y'all were building a partnership when you were really just on loan. Before we talk about Trump, we have to talk about America's memory problem and Asians' amnesia problem, because some of y'all forgot these receipts. 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, first major U.S. law to ban immigration based on nationality. Chinese workers barred, Chinese residents blocked from citizenship, violence ignored as local issue. And one thing we all must remember and bring to fruition and bring to the surface: a lot of Americans, especially racist Americans, don't know if you're Vietnamese or Chinese, Japanese or Korean. Americans simply don't know. So when they say Chinese, they mean Asian. When they say Korean, they mean Asian. When they say Japanese or Vietnamese or Thai or whatever you may be, or Filipino, they mean Asian. 1907 and 1908, gentlemen's agreement, informal deal with Japan to choke Japanese immigration and immigrants from coming to America. What about the 1924 Immigration Act? Slams the door on virtually all Asian immigrants, classifying them as aliens ineligible for citizenship. Japanese internment of World War II. When we think about that, over 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of them U.S. citizens, thrown into internment camps behind barbed wire, not for anything they did, but for who they were: Asian. Until 1952, most Asians could not naturalize at all under federal law. You guys remember Vincent Chin back in 1982, Chinese American beaten to death? He was beaten to death in Detroit by white men who thought he was Japanese and blamed him for auto job losses. They got probation and a fine. Not all people in Detroit are black, because these were white.
No way. No.
This country literally wrote your exclusion into a statute. But then something changed. Not the racism, the strategy. Because after World War II, and especially during the Cold War, the U.S. needed propaganda. It needed propaganda against the Soviets, against accusation of racism from the decolonizing world, against civil rights movement exposing America's hypocrisy. So they invented a new character, the model minority. Academic and media work in the 1960s through the 80s painted Asians as the good white minority, hardworking, quiet, family-oriented, apolitical, natural, and successful, not because they loved you, because they needed a weapon against Black Americans. And what does America do after every abuse? It doesn't repent, it rebrands. After it's done beating you, it puts you in a brochure. See, by the 1960s, as Black Americans were tearing apart segregation, the U.S. needed a new narrative. So it created a character, the model minority. The story said, Asians don't complain. Asians respect authority. Asians work hard and succeed. Asians prove racism really isn't real in America because, look, they made it. Not all Asians believe that myth, by the way, but enough did that it became a political weapon. You weren't being weaponized. You were being welcomed. Sorry. You weren't being welcome. You were being weaponized. The model minority hustle worked like this. Step 1, hold up Asians as proof that America works. Step 2, use them as a yardstick to beat Black people with. Step 3, turn on everybody the second it's convenient. And some of y'all signed up for the role. You said, we're not like those Black Americans. We came here legally. We don't riot. We study. We back the police. We back Trump. We believe in law and order. But here's what history has been screaming since the 1800s. America never saw you as white. America saw you as a tool. And tools don't join the team. Tools get used and they get put back in the shed. Korean megachurches went conservative. Indian and Chinese business owners leaned Republican for tax cuts. Some Japanese, Vietnamese, and Filipino immigrants bought into an anti-communist and anti-Black propaganda from Cold War era. They became the buffer, the proof that minorities can succeed without reparations. We can succeed without reparations because we've been doing it, but pay what you owe. We are owed reparations. But pay what you owe. We are owed reparations. The face the right wing would roll out whenever they needed a non-white backdrop. But here's the truth they couldn't really outrun. America never saw you as white. America saw you as useful, then expendable. Asian Americans once faced segregated schools in California and elsewhere. They lumped with Black and Mexican children or isolated altogether. Japanese Americans were forced into internment camps during World War II while their property was seized. Koreans, Vietnamese, and others were caught in the middle of U.S. wars in Asia, then treated as suspicious or foreign on arrival to the States. You were never on the team. You were being rented as an example. Now let's talk about the Orange era, because some Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indians, Filipinos said Trump is good for business. Trump is strong against China. Trump is tough on crime and protest. Trump supports religious freedom. They took a selfie at the rally and called it partnership. But Trump's relationship with Asians didn't start in a church basement. It started in his mouth and in his policies. He repeatedly called COVID-19 the China virus and Kung flu, framed a pandemic as a foreign invasion, turned Asian faces, especially Chinese, into walking symbols of disease and danger. And for reference, I don't know why Asian Americans will vote against their own interests, because it probably would benefit you more. Not that I support you voting for the Democratic Party, because I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but nonetheless, the Democrats are the ones who passed the anti-Asian hate crime bill labeled in guides under the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. It states right here in good old black and white.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
Following the spread of COVID-19 in 2020, there has been a dramatic increase in hate crimes and violence against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. During this time frame, race, not ethnic, not where you're from, has been cited as a primary reason for discrimination, making up over 90% of incidents. 90% of the crime of Asian Americans came from COVID-19 and some of the rhetoric President Trump was spewing in your community. And the United States condemns and denounces any and all anti-Asian and Pacific Islander sentiment in any form. Roughly 36% of these incidents took place at a business, and more than 2 million Asian American businesses have contributed to the diverse fabric of American life. That was the Democrats.
Yes.
More than 1.9 million Asian American Pacific Islanders, older adults, mostly those older adults who are recent immigrants or have limited English proficiency, may face even greater challenges in dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, including discrimination, economic insecurity, and language isolation. And then they give you some example of people who were actually murdered for being Asian. This happened in Atlanta, Georgia region, 7 of whom were women and 6 of them were women of Asian descent. This is the party that you vote against. Not that I'm for the Democrats, not that I'm for a Republican, but essentially you voted against your own best interest. Now, the Department of Justice China Initiative targeted Chinese and Chinese American scientists as presumed spies. But do not forget what I stated earlier. When they say Chinese, they mean Asian. When they say Korean, they mean Asian. When they say Japanese, they mean Asian, because racist Americans cannot tell the difference, or they're not going to ask you for your green card. They're not going to ask you for your passport. They're not going to even take the time to say, hey, where are your family from? Where are you? Oh, you're Vietnamese. Oh, okay. No, they're just going to call you Asian, or they're going to call you Chinese altogether. But the DOJ China's initiative wrecked careers on vague suspicion and paperwork errors, quietly dropping cases when the evidence fell apart. But believe me when I tell you that just like anytime someone's accused of a crime in the Black community, the stigma is still in place. See, the receipts that you guys were ignoring, like a study by there was a study by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism that found anti-Asian hate crimes in major U.S. cities spiked dramatically during 2020 and 2021, with increases in places like New York, LA, San Fran, overlapping with China virus rhetoric that President Trump was actually spewing. You guys remember Stop AAPI? Hate documented thousands of incidents and harassment and discrimination and assault during that period, often explicitly tied to COVID-19 scapegoating. And yet, you still had Korean shop owners, Vietnamese elders, Indian business owners, Taiwanese and Chinese small business conservative showing up in Asia for Asians for Trump merch. Asians for Trump?
It's been a waste of time for me, folks. I'll be honest with you.
Trump was never for Asians. He was for using Asians against China abroad and against Black people at home. But Trump's policy blueprint never cared about your nuance. It never cared about your ethnic. So again, when I tell you Vietnamese, Thai, all these different Asian ethnics that we have in America, they don't care about your ethnic. They don't care about your nuance. It didn't distinguish between Chinese American citizens, Chinese national, Korean small business owner, Indian H-1B worker, Vietnamese refugee, Japanese American who's been here since 1900s. To that camp, you were all the same. You were Asian. You're foreign. You're a suspect. You are expendable. This is what blows my mind, ladies and gentlemen. Some of y'all marched out in red caps, make America great again, like none of this ever happened, like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 to 1943. First and only law to completely ban immigration from a specific nationality for decades. Asian immigrants classified as aliens ineligible for citizenship, blocking them from owning property and naturalizing right here in America. The Japanese internment, 1942 to 1945. Over 120,000 Japanese Americans, mostly citizens, as I told you before, 2/3 rounded up, imprisoned behind barbed wire and later given a token apology and a small check of $20,000. At least you got something. Vincent Chin, 1982. Chinese America again beaten to death in Detroit by white auto workers who thought he was Japanese and blamed him for job loss. As I told you, he was Chinese, but they thought he was Japanese. Japanese, but he was Korean. You get what I'm getting at? And the killers got probation and a fine. And when we look at post 9/11 surveillance, South Asian, Arabs, and Muslim communities, including many Indians and Pakistanis, face registration programs, FBI surveillance, detention without charge. Again, as we look at all of these things, especially COVID-19, which is one of the most recent examples, Asians of all backgrounds, Koreans, Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese, Thai, you name it, were attacked because of racists. Because of racists do not read passports. You can memorize all the U.S. Constitution you want. The mob only sees your face. You can't spreadsheet your way into whiteness. You can't donation your way into safety. You can't agents for Trump your way out of a system that once banned all of you by law. For decades, the model minority myth made Asians the buffer, not all, but a loud enough slice, enough to move into Black neighborhoods, profit off of Black dollars, and side with police every single time. Talk down on Black folks behind closed doors while copying our culture in music, fashion, slang, and everything else. Then you let right-wing pundits say, look at Asian success. Racism can't be that bad. They're doing very, very well here in America. What's wrong with the Blacks? That wasn't just cultural arrogance. That was political utility. It let America say, if Asians can do it, why can't Black people do it? We don't need reparations. Look at Asians' income. We don't need systematic reform. Look at Asians' test scores. Some of you become the conservatives' favorite prop, rolled out in op-eds and think tank reports attacking affirmative action, used in court cases to gut policies Black people fought and bled for, paraded as a good immigrant to shame the ungrateful Black folk right here in America. And then COVID hit and foreign policy shifted and selling you were the villain again. And we said, this man doesn't love you. This man doesn't see you. This man will use you as a weapon against us. Then use the same weapon against you. A lot of Asian conservative answers with, Black people complain too much. You're playing the race card. We worked hard and made it. Why can't you? We're law abiding. And yet, here we are. Let's give some receipts, should we not? I believe that we should bring a lot of things
with the Asian community right now. Because on Instagram yesterday, there was a post from a group, the Asian American Pacific Islander group that I follow. And, they're saying, we're so upset that Trump got reelected. Now we all fear for our lives, blah, blah, blah. Right. Just hear me out for a second, though. But how in the world are 39% of you guys that, do you have amnesia? Do you not remember the pandemic? Do you not remember what he said? How
we
he
remember.
Targeted us? How we had an influx of violence because of his rhetoric about Asian people? I mean, there were deaths of our elderly Asian people. Anyways, I'm so angry with
because why are we so smart but so silent? What's with the silence? I suspect that if we opened our mouths, we would side with Black people and other brown people as the real American heroes. Yeah, we're brown, not white. But this would disrupt the white supremacy brainwash we're caught in. And deep down, we hate ourselves for siding with whiteness. We know they're wrong. Our silence is the sound of us hating ourselves. But that's the Squid Game trap that they set for us, an Asian American matrix that messes with our reality. And it's all based on hating Black people. The ones we're all secretly trying to copy, even the white people's. White supremacy isn't smart, but it's tricky like that. You like being tricked? I don't know any Asians who put up with that. We gotta decolonize ourselves and find Asian joy. Therein lies our voice. I'm mad at Asian Americans because why are we so smart but so silent? What's
38%, which makes Asian Americans the second largest racial demographic to support Harris. And yes, any increase among Asian Americans in support for white supremacy is problematic. And let's be clear, I acknowledge and own the ways that my Asian American community does harm to other marginalized communities, Black people especially, and that's not just with how we vote. Which is why for people who are actually familiar with my content and not just responding reactively, they're aware that the focus of my work, not just last week, not just during an election year, but for the entire time that I have been creating content, is dismantling the model minority myth, addressing Asian Americans and our need to not align with white supremacy, and our need to do the work to dismantle systems of oppression in the United States. And that 38% indicates that I clearly have a lot more work to do. But when you choose to compare your community's 54% to my community's 38%, you are not representing yourself as somebody who is willing to acknowledge and take accountability for the work that needs to be done in your community. Because let's be honest, if the entire nation had voted the way that Asian American voters did, your community especially, right now we would be celebrating an easy Harris victory. And you wouldn't even need to distract yourselves with these blue bracelets and asking Black people to validate them for you.
War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. We have to remember, before 1965, most Asians were blocked. They were capped or frozen out. After 1965, Asian immigration exploded, riding on infrastructure built by Black struggle. Every time an Asian wins a discrimination case, it really rests on legal precedents carved out by Black plaintiffs and Black lawyers. See, we weren't jealous. We are experienced. We weren't your enemies. We are your advance notice. Far too long, some Asians thought anti-Blackness could be a ladder. Again, not all Asians, but enough to do some damage. Enough to call us slurs in your languages while copying our culture, moving into Black neighborhoods, profit off of Black spending, but side with cops every single time. And yes, use we obey the laws as code for we're better than them. That's what they say. We obey the law, meaning that we're better than them. They align with racist white conservatives on crime, immigration, and protest narratives. You were the buffer class, held up as proof that racism wasn't real, used to undercut reparations and affirmative action and Black political claims. Then affirmative action cases came. And some Asian plaintiffs were used as the spear to attack policies Black folks bled for. At the exact same time, anti-Asian hate was surging. And what did you get? You got no protection, escalating violence, a right wing that loves your statistics but still will shove your grandmother on the street. You can't outrun a system you help reinforce. So let's be clear. We're not saints. Foundational Black Americans are not saints. We've taken losses. We've had internal problems. We are not pretending Black America is perfect. But we do have the longest, bloodiest resume in confronting white supremacy on this soil. When you look at abolitionist movements and Reconstruction governors and resistance, legal fights that redefine the Constitution, civil rights marches and boycotts, police accountability and the struggles therein, labor uprising, contemporary battles over mass incarceration, surveillance, voting rights, and reparation, slave rebellions, Reconstruction, Black Wall Streets, Black Power self-defense, voting rights litigation. When we warned you, this wasn't arrogance. It was a pattern recognition. You're living what we tried to get you to see on paper, no less. We've been the warning siren, not the enemy. Have you noticed something?
What?
I wonder if some of you, ladies and gentlemen, have noticed something. The Agents for Trump content got quiet very quickly, did it not? The merch disappeared, the hashtags evaporated, the loudest voices weren't real low once the hate crime spiked and the slurs got mainstream. Now people remember all of a sudden what we've been trying to have them remember even before. The Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment, Vincent Chin, COVID assaults, visa crackdowns and surveillance. Good.
That call was perfect. It couldn't have been nicer.
You should remember, because America's racism isn't nostalgialistic. It's recyclable. So here's the crossroads for Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indian, Filipino, Pakistani, Thai, Cambodian, Laotian, Hmong, and every other community under the Asian label. Are you going to keep chasing whiteness that will never fully claim you, or are you going to stand with the lineage? Not that we're asking, not that we want you to, because we understand, bump all that. This stand in truth for your own people and understand what the system of white supremacy have done to your group. Because as we are delineated, we understand, even if we allow some people to the cookout, we never know who an agent or an op is, because for quite some time, we're not talking about a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. We're talking about over 40 years of certain demographic and ethnic groups in America who are non-Black have been siding with the system of white supremacy, and we just can't tell the difference no more, because the same energy and behavior are coming out of these groups. And this includes Black immigrant groups as well, not just Asian, not just Latino, but Black as well. So here's the thing. Are you going to keep cosplaying the model minority to prove you're not like the Blacks? Or are you finally going to admit that your safety and our justice are on the same battlefield? Because whether it's Chinese exclusion yesterday, or a Muslim ban today, or some new panic tomorrow or pandemic tomorrow, the empire doesn't care if your last name is Kim, Patel, Nugent, Chin, Ido, or Johnson. It sees other and moves accordingly. You don't need Trump. You don't need the model minority costume. You don't need honorary whiteness. You need clarity. You need your memory back. You need solidarity built on truth, not flattery, to Asian America. We are not your rival. We are your warning, your present, your potential partner. The question isn't, we're agents for Trump. The real question is, what are you going to be for when the next wave hits? Whiteness? Justice? See, this platform is BlackLogic, where we bring the truth with the receipt. We rip off the mask of the model minority myth and remind America of the one thing it fears the most, and awaken people who finally stop auditioning for whiteness and start acknowledging the truth.